Greetings, Internet. I'm John Bailey, the Popcorn Junkie, and here's what I saw this week. And it's about time we got a Fred Hampton biopic. For those of you who aren't familiar, Fred Hampton was the chairman of the Black Panther Party in Illinois, and he was becoming the next quote-unquote Black Messiah, as J. Edgar Hoover coined the term, the most prominent figure in the Black liberation movement at the time. And because of the effort to paint the Black Panthers as a strictly violent organization, a lot of their work to help poor black communities was overlooked because they wanted them to basically be seen as just a terrorist group. And Fred Hampton, like so many other figures at that era, was another victim of the FBI's COINTELPRO initiative. And, you know, seeing a lot of this come to light and be, you know, looked back upon and, you know, reviewed since it was 50 some odd years ago, it really makes you wonder how much progress we could have had if the FBI didn't make it their mission to just completely destroy and dismantle every effort for a minority group to gain political power. I don't want to get too into the actual politics of Fred Hampton, because then we're talking about like black socialism and all of these other things that are way above my pay grade. Like, I am not smart enough to get into these kind of topics, nor is it really specifically my lane to talk about it. There are much more qualified people to get into this, especially on this side and in the world in general. So, if nothing else, go seek them out. I'm just here to talk about the movie, and the movie is really damn good. I do want to bookmark this for later, just because it opens up with the most dreaded words you can see before a biopic. Inspired by a true story. There's this sort of filmmaking legalese when they put these sorts of things. Based on a true story means that they stuck closer to the events of what happened. Inspired by true events, or inspired by a true story, often means that the filmmaker is taking a lot more liberties with the truth in order to do something more artistic. So it's harder to say what all was the truth and what all was artistic flourish. You know, that isn't to, say anything bad about this movie in that regard. It just means that if I want to know how accurate this movie is, I'm going to have to come back to it after the fact. This is just a strict reviewing the movie as I saw it, not critiquing the accuracy of what I saw. The story follows the titular Judas, Bill O'Neill, who is played here by Lakeith Stanfield, but the actual Bill O'Neill at the time was like 17 or 19 years old, so it feels really weird to have a guy who's so much older than the actual person he's portraying. But at the same point, like, when I talked about this on Letterboxd, a friend of mine there, he pointed out this sort of idea that Lakeith and Daniel Kaluuya, they're portraying people who are like in their early 20s, young adults, but the actors portraying them are much older, and at least a decade older, really. And it kind of plays into the idea that these young black men are seen as more mature and more adult than their white counterparts. And it's an interesting idea. I don't know if that was King's intention, but it's an interesting sort of aspect to the movie that I didn't think about. So a shout out to Jay on Letterboxd for pointing that out to me. The movie opens with O'Neill as a petty carjacker, and the FBI eventually recruits him to infiltrate the Black Panther Party and specifically spy on Fred Hampton, because before that, the initial opening is Martin Sheen as J. Edgar Hoover decrying the Black Panthers and wanting to bring down and prevent a Black Messiah from rising. He said that in regards to Martin Luther King. I think he may have said it in regard to Malcolm X, but he was always like just obsessed with preventing this sort of messianic figure to help liberate black people and bring them into more political prominence and give them more power. As O'Neill is spying on Hampton, we're beginning to see Hampton rise into more prominence, not just as the chairman of the Black Panther Party, but as somebody who is reaching out and uniting the gangs of Chicago to prevent more, gang violence and secondhand violence in the community, as well as to non-black groups like the Young Patriots and the Young Lords, who were white and Hispanic, and forming his Rainbow Coalition. And so we're seeing Fred Hampton on the rise as the Black Messiah that Hoover was always worried about, while O'Neill is there to try and keep him, to be the Judas, to betray him. That's the title. Very straightforward in that regard. Like with MLK FBI, the ultimate villains here are the FBI. Whatever your thoughts on the Black Panthers were, the FBI were the ones who strictly, through COINTELPRO, went in and undermined any chance of progress. And this wasn't just the Black Panthers, we're talking any kind of leftist movement, any kind of minority progress. Like, outside of this, there's a great Dollop episode that covers an indigenous rights activist through the 70s. And COINTELPRO targeted the indigenous people as well, while they were trying to get more rights, and they were trying to rise it, make sure to push back against oppression. So yeah, this COINTELPRO targeted everybody, but it loved focusing specifically on black liberation because they knew that was the easiest one to paint as the villain to the American people. And yeah, we're still feeling the repercussions of that whole initiative to this day. It is staggering how deep those wounds are. I do want to say this though, for Hollywood trying to co-opt these revolutionary figures, I do take some, I have some problems with that, but when it comes to the movies themselves, this blows Trial of the Chicago 7 out of the water. While this is only his second feature film, Shaka King has proven himself to be just a fantastic filmmaker. And if nothing else, I really hope this does for him what Fruitvale Station ended up doing for Ryan Coogler in propelling him into more work, because I absolutely want to see what Shaka King does after this, because just this alone has proven he has a great eye for film, and he is a great, he's great at story crafting in and of itself. Of course, the real standout for this is Daniel Kaluuya. Every scene that he's in just oozes with charisma and personality, which you would hope for, given that he is portraying a very charismatic person from real life. And yeah, this is his best performance since Get Out. Like, Kaluuya's always been great, but here he just is a powerhouse. This is absolutely award-worthy, and we may not be able to see him get awarded for it until next year, depending on if this got shown in... I don't know if this got shown in time for this upcoming award season, but yeah, dude deserves some accolades for this performance, because he is the reason, if nothing else, he is the reason to watch this movie, just to see him bring Fred Hampton to life in this regard. He is absolutely amazing. With how good Kaluuya is, I don't want to make it seem like the rest of the cast is slouching either. Lakeith Stanfield as O'Neill is very understated, and he's very... Kaluuya is able to be big and bombastic and have all of this charisma and give these amazing performances. And Lakeith Stanfield is unfortunately kind of relegated to a more not underwritten, but understated, quiet character. He does get to be bigger at times, but so much of O'Neill's job was to stay under the radar. And Stanfield is good in the role. He just gets outshined so much because of the way that character is written. But he's good in the role too. Jesse Plemons, who has been an ongoing, he's been playing mostly villainous characters, although it varies from film to film. Sometimes he's more comedic, sometimes he is a piece of crap like in Detroit, but he's always been a solid character actor, and here he's playing the FBI agent who's handling O'Neill. And they do mention the fact that this FBI agent was also one of the ones who investigated the murders that inspired a different movie, Ghosts of Mississippi. No, not Ghosts of Mississippi. That's Medgar Evers. Mississippi Burning. And so there was an interesting connection to have there. So you have two movies tied together by one actual FBI agent, and it's interesting to see how he went from that investigation to then becoming part of the COINTELPRO initiative. And Plemons is good in this as well, but once again, his character is also understated. There is a bit where you begin to see just how far he's pushed in terms of his morality, because as time goes on, he learns just how far Hoover wants them to go, and and Plemons' character has to question how far he is, how much he wants to keep this job in order to, and how much he agrees with Hoover. And so I think that was a nice touch that King added to this character. I didn't recognize the actors playing the Black Panthers, the other Black Panther members, but they're all excellent, especially the actress portraying who will eventually be Hampton's lover and the mother of his child. I forget what she changed her name after the events of this movie, but she is the actress portraying her is excellent, and so are the other actors who play the Black Panthers in the movie. They really are. I didn't recognize the names, but they all do a fantastic job in this movie and kind of rounding out this whole cast of characters. And so, yeah, the entire cast here is excellent. I mean, we even got Martin Sheen as J. Edgar Hoover, and dude just oozes with the slime and the visceral hatred that Hoover had towards these groups, to anyone left of center right, essentially politically. He really was just this scuzzball of a person, and Sheen brings so much of that. He's just downright despicableness to his performance. And dude is like 80 now. Dude hasn't missed a beat. Sheen is still fantastic, and I thought he was only going to be like an outside figure, someone who showed up at the beginning and that's it. But he keeps popping up throughout the movie, and every time it's just like, ooh, it feels like the big boss showed up, but then nobody ever gets the chance to actually face him because nobody would. But yeah, the whole cast here is fantastic. There was really only one major technical criticism I had. My family and I decided to watch this for Valentine's Day. Don't ask. I don't know how it happened either. But one of the things was we watched it on HBO Max, and throughout the second half of the movie, specifically with Kaluuya's Fred Hampton, but we felt it with Plemons and Stanfield at points too. There's a point where the dialogue is so soft that it's harder to hear, and I don't know if it was just bad capturing during the recording, or if they weren't able to do better enunciation during the ADR. I don't know about the filmmaking process for this, but it felt like the dialogue was not enunciated well enough for how quiet it was, so it was harder to understand what the characters were saying. And once again, this could have been HBO Max, it could have been our own setup, it could be the fact that we're all going deaf, who knows, but it was something that we all picked up while watching it, and it specifically took my mom out of the movie, but it was something that we all kind of had to deal with, and I'm wondering which one of the variables caused that. But it's a minor thing. It's a minor technicality sort of thing. It just wasn't. It was something that people, especially if you have hearing issues, should know about the second half of the movie, is that you may want to watch it with closed captioning on. As much praise as this is getting, I don't want to act like this is some definitive watch when it comes to Fred Hampton. There's this thing that I felt with Trial of Chicago 7 specifically, where people are overly praising it for tackling these characters and these people, where while this is infinitely better than Trial of Chicago 7, I can't help but feel this sort of disingenuousness surrounding it. Like, this is good. This movie is good. Trial of Chicago 7 is not that good. Because Aaron Sorkin is doing his, doing his Aaron Sorkin-ness all over it, and it completely takes you out because it's so ham-fisted and over the top and completely, divorced from what actually happened. This isn't that bad, but I get this feeling that the people who are making these movies, not Shaka King specifically, but Sorkin and the producers, they're co-opting this sort of radical, revolutionary idea and these ideals in order to promote their neoliberal, hey, we're radical within the confines of, late-stage capitalism. And King doesn't fall into that trap as badly as Sorkin does, but it's also why when they announced recently that Ava DuVernay was going to direct what is her name? Assata Shakur, Tupac's mom. She was a Black Panther member, and apparently they want DuVernay to tackle her story, but DuVernay has shown that she has not a lot of respect for Black leftist the sort of Black leftist movement, and she's basically another neoliberal, and so her tackling a revolutionary and a radical like Shakur feels like Aaron Sorkin tackling the Chicago 7. It doesn't feel, faithful. It feels like they're going to co-opt that radicality, but fit it within their perfectly settled, capitalist-friendly, society. It feels like they're going to make it safe and not really push how revolutionary these people were. King doesn't fall into that, thankfully. He does really showcase how Hampton was this powerful figure, and how who knows what could have been accomplished if the FBI didn't, single him out specifically and make sure to undermine everything he worked for. So, yeah, I just feel like a lot of the people who are praising these movies wouldn't be the ones when these actual figures were around to be cheering them on. They would be the ones who were like, no, this is bad. You're doing a naughty. But now that they can safely co-opt the revolutionaries and make them safer for capitalism, it feels pretty disingenuous. That said, don't think of this as like the definitive Fred Hampton story. I would see this is perfect for a jumping off point. After watching this, go seek out more info about the Panthers and Fred Hampton. And if nothing else, if you see this as a great movie that chronicles the, undermining of Black liberation by the FBI and how they target, Black people at risk, or, people who are more willing to sell out and, do things for their own benefit, then yeah, it's a powerful story in that regard, but it's not like the end all be all either. So don't act like it's like this is definitive. This is a perfect jumping off point, and it's just an all around good movie. So yeah, if you haven't yet, definitely check it out. But then be sure to, if you want more info, do more research after the fact, because the real stuff is even crazier and more powerful than what this movie could do.
Stand up, raise your face to the sky higher. Together, we can take it higher. We can take it higher.
Oh boy, it's time to rip into this one. If you're out of the loop here, basically it was announced a couple years ago that Sia would be making the move to directing film. This is her feature film debut, I believe. And the story was going to be about a kid on the autism spectrum, or feature a kid on the autism spectrum. And then as news slowly trickled out about this, it revealed how little she actually cares about people on the autism spectrum. Like, first it started off with firing the original actress who was on the spectrum because Sia wanted to put in her little protege, Maddie Ziegler, in the role. And when she got criticized for that by actual actors on the spectrum, she basically insulted them and said they weren't any good anyway. And then it just continued to spiral after the fact. Like, she paired up with Autism Speaks, which is, you know, within the autism community, it's considered a hate group because they essentially treat autism as a disease in need of curing, and which is basically like saying, oh, we have to cure Down syndrome, or we have to cure schizophrenia. You can't cure that. That's not a disease. It's not like, you know, a viral infection. This isn't something that you can just, you know, take fluids and some antibiotics and it'll be gone. This is a condition. It would be like saying multiple sclerosis needs to be cured. You can't really cure that. It's like this is just something the body does in the infinite number of variables during, you know, gestation and development. It's the idea that you would have to cure that is insane, and yet Sia decided, oh, perfect organization to team up with. They got the puzzle pieces and everything. And with the crazy part being that as the movie was closer to coming out, Autism Speaks, which thinks we need to be cured, saw the writing on the wall and said, we denounce this movie. We have nothing to do with this movie. So even they saw how awful this whole thing was and how awful Sia was acting, and, you know, just completely going mask off, just ableist all over the place. And they said, we do not want any part of this. When even the group that thinks that we have a disease says nope, and nope's out of there, you done goofed. Not to mention the fact that there were initial cuts of the movie that featured, I don't know how prominent it is in the final cut, but there were definitely scenes featuring something called applied behavioral analysis, which is basically a means of torturing young kids on the spectrum in order to behave correctly. And fun fact, this sort of treatment was used against kids that were deemed at risk of developing sexual disorders, i.e. becoming gay or transgender. So, something that was deemed unfit for gay kids is perfectly fine and acceptable to be used against people with autism. Good to know that's where we stand in the medical community. I, in good conscience, cannot tell you to seek this movie out. Like, even if you want to see, like, a so bad, like, worst movie of the year sort of thing, don't seek out this movie, you know, for that. Just because it really is I don't want any support for this movie in any regard. I'm covering it because I thought, being on the spectrum, I could give some insight into this whole debacle and this whole nonsense. And plus, I did want to get it out of the way so I never have to think about it again until I'm compiling my, you know, bottom 10 of 2021 list. And man, this is the new low bar. I mean, when you're rated worse than Cats, you know you made a bad movie. Like, the fact that this is rated worse than one of the biggest debacles in film history in the last, you know, in this century, is something. So there's something for Sia to hang her hat on. The movie itself actually opens with basically a Sia music video, But with Ziegler making this face where the lips are kind of pulled back, it's where the front teeth are showing. And she does that throughout the whole movie, but it's a kind of facial gesture that's associated with people on the spectrum. And then she does dance moves that are sort of like based on stimming, which is something people on the spectrum do where they rapidly, make these movements or wild motions with usually their hands, sometimes their arms. It's a standard thing that they do, but Sia decided, let's turn that into a dance, and it's like, why would you do that? What made you think that this was a good idea? Because I don't want to see things that are, these things that are all associated with being on the spectrum, these things that people already kind of look down at people on the spectrum for doing, and see them treated as like a minstrel show, a fun dance for them to do, for us to do, and it all feels so mocking, like, this thing that you just do because it's how you are. It's a fun dance that I get to put on for everybody to watch, and it's just right from the opening, I felt sick because of that. The thing is, right after that whole music video segment, we get into glitter grade levels of melodrama. Like, we're talking some of the worst garbage, like pop star, projects out there. Glitter, Crossroads. What are some of the other ones? But specifically Glitter. This reeks of glitter, sort of like just absolute garbage melodrama, and it makes me wonder, like, why are we going from these pretty standard, like, generic, not even good music videos to this garbage story and this really crappy melodrama? Like, what is the connection here? Why are we doing it like this? Of course, once the melodrama kicks in, that's where Ziegler unfortunately gives her worst performance, because she's fine as a dancer, and sadly, Ziegler is basically made to give a simple Jack level performance for somebody on the autism spectrum. Except instead of Ben Stiller making a mockery of how actors will play up, mental conditions for Oscar bait, this is done entirely seriously. But it's of the same quality as Ben Stiller's Simple Jack from Tropic Thunder. Just without any sense of irony or satire or realization that that sort of performance is inherently bad. Of course, I don't want to, I mentioned Ziegler's performance, but I don't want to make it feel like I'm blaming her for this. There's an interview that came out recently that went into how Ziegler, from day one of shooting, was uncomfortable with this sort of performance. And yet it was Sia who said, "Oh no, this is fine, you're doing great, keep going." So Ziegler felt rightly that this was a terrible thing to do. And Sia said, "That's okay, do it anyway." And Sia and Ziegler's relationship is questionable at best. Like, the whole thing of her just constantly bringing on this originally prepubescent girl and now adolescent girl for all of this stuff, and now basically saying, "You're gonna be the autistic kid in my movie," and having her give this performance that she admits she was uncomfortable giving. I do not want the heat to be on Ziegler for this. Like, yeah, she did it, but she was told to do it by somebody by the celebrity who's been in her life for the last, almost a decade. Sia's been a part of Ziggler's life. And they've been collaborating just constantly. And so there's this celebrity who's basically made your career by being in all of her music videos, and she is demanding you give this awful performance, and you don't feel comfortable with it, and she says do it anyway. And yeah, I don't want Ziggler to be the brunt of the criticism here, because I can only imagine that kind of, what kind of stuff she's going through because of what Sia. I don't even know what Sia treats her like in between stuff, but yeah, like the fact that Sia saw that Ziggler was uncomfortable with this performance and told her to keep doing it is just, I mean, that's just awful. That is genuinely awful that you would make somebody do that. That's like Kubrickian levels of just, abusing your actors in order to get something you want. It is, it just does not sit right with me. The worst part of it is I want stories about people on the spectrum to be told. I just want it to be about us. Like, I think Mozart and the Whale gets a pass. It was a movie from 2005. I don't know how many people know about it, but it features Josh Hartnett and Radha Mitchell as two characters on the autism spectrum. Back before it was called that, and they referred to it as Asperger's syndrome. I've since mentioned that designation is not only out of date, but it is kind of bad that we use the name of a guy who worked with the Nazis to describe people on the spectrum. But this was 2005. I think this was right before, or a few years before, the DSM-5 made the official diagnosis, autism spectrum disorder. So it was at the time accurate. But the way Hartnett and Mitchell played their characters, the filmmakers respected what it was like to be on the spectrum. The characters were given dignity and respect, and they did feature these characteristics of being on the spectrum, and a lot of the drama was centered around issues that came from being on the spectrum, but it wasn't insulting. It gave the condition a level of dignity, and it wasn't about how, they don't fit in with normal society. It's just about their struggles. And that's the kind of story I want. Like, even though it's clear that Hartnett and Mitchell aren't on the spectrum, it would be nice to have actors on the spectrum be able to portray their story the same way that a deaf actress was able to portray a deaf character in A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place 2. But I'm not so rigid to say that nobody can play somebody on the spectrum. I'm more concerned with how they're playing it. I would much rather have a talented actor who isn't on the spectrum portray a character respectfully than have none at all. Like, if that's my choice, is to have none at all, or have to have a neurotypical actor play somebody on the spectrum, I would rather it be done respectfully than not at all. But ideally, we would have more people on the spectrum able to portray those roles. But my bigger concern is how they're written and directed, more than whether or not the person playing it is neurodivergent or not. Ideally, we just need more neurodivergent actors in general, but that's a whole other fight. But my main concern is that the people telling these stories have respect for us, and Sia clearly does not. Because that's the thing. All the discussion made it seem like Ziggler's character was going to be the center of the movie. Oh, no. You see, this is a Rain Man situation where the actual protagonist is a neurotypical person, while the person on the spectrum is just a side character. Somebody that has to be cared for, and made sure that everything's okay for them. They're barely even a character. No, it's more about this neurotypical person and their problems. and how they have to deal with us. So, thanks for that, Sia. We're doing this shit still. I think the kicker of this all is that the character Ziegler plays is only referred to as music. She isn't even given a real name. Everybody calls her music because she listens to music all the time, through headphones. I think that says everything you need to know about how little her actual character matters, because she isn't even given a real name. It's just music. So the character music is not even the lead character in the movie music. That's how little we matter to Sia. So who is this actual protagonist that we really focus on this whole time? Kate Hudson. Kate Hudson plays Music's... God, I hate that that's her name. She plays Music's alcoholic sister who, after their grandma passes away, who was Music's initial caretaker and guardian, Kate Hudson is brought in to be the next guardian. And it's all about how Kate Hudson's life is hard, y'all. Like, man, isn't it just life so hard for her? I don't want to make it sound like I'm making fun of Hudson's character for being an alcoholic. Much like with people on the spectrum, a lot of people with alcoholism are not taken seriously, specifically in the media. Like, alcoholism is seen as the fun disease, the thing we can all laugh at because look at them. Their life is a downward spiral and they're addicted to a substance. Isn't it fun? Like, that's the kind of seriousness that Sia deals with Hudson's character. She deals with alcoholism as seriously as she deals with autism. So Hudson's whole addiction in a good movie would be the defining part of her character arc. And here, it's just, an excuse for her to act drunk a bunch of times and the main defining aspect of her character is to whine about how hard she has it. Especially like when she's paired up with Leslie Odom Jr. and we'll get to him. But her whole thing is like Odom is more concerned with making sure that music's okay, and so she whines that that you don't love me enough. You'll care more about my sister. I want someone to love. It's all so bratty and petulant, and like a good director could make her character flaws, tolerable, maybe even good, because it plays into a whole arc. But nah, Sia is incompetent in that regard, and all it comes off with is a petty child with an addiction problem that is never taken seriously. I mentioned that the movie opens with a music video. Well, almost every 10 minutes, on the dot, I count it. I made sure to check every time a music video segment popped up. It is almost like every 10 minutes on the dot, Sia devolves into just a random music video. And like, that would be one thing, but these are not good music videos. These feel like generic, almost corporate music videos, like the kind of stuff they make for a Target commercial or something. Every time one came up, I expected a corporate logo to pop up at the end. Here's the generic song that isn't good. Oh God, we'll get into the actual music. But every time this video pops up, I swear it's just gonna cut back to buy Starbucks or buy Walmart. Something. It feels corporate and callous and cold. It doesn't feel like somebody with actual passion, especially a musician, made these music videos. Which is the other thing. Beyonce has done a bunch of popular and well-regarded visual albums. Lemonade more so than Black is King, but Black is King I think is still, at least respected. But Beyonce has proven that the visual album can be done and is good enough to, if you're a good enough filmmaker, you can make this whole visual album thing and make it interesting and good. So why didn't Sia just do that? Why include this whole melodrama and all of these terrible characters and this terrible writing? Why not just do a visual album. Make it like one of her music videos and make it like a string as it plays and, do that. Why not just do a visual album? She would have saved herself so much criticism if it was just a visual album. And I don't know why she felt the need to throw in this garbage movie in between pretty generic and forgettable music videos. Speaking of generic and forgettable, the music. The actual music, that's the thing. I'm not a Sia fan. I don't really, seek her out. But I recognize that she has good music. I recognize that she has produced good music. None of that talent into music making went into this movie. For a movie that she felt so strongly about putting these things that quote-unquote needed to be there about the autistic character, she didn't even care enough to make good music. For a movie called Music, featuring a character named Music, you'd think that she would have given a crap about the music. But Sia cared as much about the music as she did about an accurate portrayal of autism. The music here is some of the most forgettable, just absolutely this is album filler music. None of this feels like it's worth making the movie all about music and making these music videos all about these songs that aren't even that good. At least make the music good and we may have something to give you. Oh, this movie is absolute garbage and misrepresents autism and it's terrible with these characters. But at least the music was good. The music's not even good. So the whole reason to make it all about music isn't even worth having. It just so the one thing driving this whole endeavor is worthless. Oh, but we've only scratched the surface. The autism was one thing. The addiction is another. Let's talk about the side characters. Yeah, one of the most prominent side character is Leslie Odom Jr., who is a Ghanaian immigrant, I believe, and his main defining characteristic is that he is there to help music and is just forced together with Kate Hudson just because. Not because they have chemistry or they are good together, but because they are the two leading neurodivergent characters. So they have to end up together by filmmaking law, apparently. But no. The thing with Junior's character, Odom Jr.'s character, is he got AIDS. And the movie treats that as respectfully as I just did. So yeah, autism. Serious condition, affects so many people and those around them, should be treated with respect. Alcoholism, same thing. Serious condition, affects so many people and those around them, should be treated with respect. AIDS, HIV, life-threatening disease. Horrible thing that ruins people's quality of life and is devastating. Treated with the same respect as the breast cancer subplot in The Room. That's how seriously this was. This is less respectful than Temptation Confessions of a Marriage Counselor. Tyler Perry handled AIDS better than Sia. Let that sink in. Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's just AIDS and then it's never brought up again. It's just oh, I have AIDS. Never gonna talk about that again. Just gonna completely forget that ever happened. It is so superfluous to the actual plot. It just is thrown in there to make his character sad. Wow, Sia. Oh, but we haven't gotten to the best part. No, the autism is bad. The addiction's bad. The AIDS is just heinous, what she did. But how about the fat Asian kid who is forced to box by his abusive father, doesn't even get to say a single line in the movie, and then just dies. His wife-beater wearing, wife-beating dad kills this kid because he's not a man enough, and that's the only Asian representation you get in the whole movie. I want to try and understand what made her think this was a good idea. What made her think that doing these things was okay? Because not every depiction of a group needs to be the most positive, just absolutely paragon. But if the only representation you have in a movie is an effeminate kid abused by his literally wife beater wearing dad the whole movie, and he doesn't even get to say a real line, and all that happens is the dad screams, and I hope it's actual Chinese, because if not, I would not be surprised if the guy didn't even speak a real Asian language. I would not be shocked from Sia at this point. But that's the only Asian representation you get in basically the entire movie? I'm speechless. I am genuinely speechless that this happened. I'm genuinely speechless. Like, that's the thing. It doesn't even play into the actual plot. Like, the main characters don't even realize that it happens. It just happens so that we suffer and we have to endure it and nobody else does. Because Sia hates us. That is the only reasoning I can think of for her to do this. Because she genuinely despises humanity and thinks we deserve this, whatever it is. Oh, by the way, all of these awful things sprinkle in Ben Schwartz as a gay stereotype. So just get everybody in there. Get the African man with AIDS. Get the white chick with alcoholism. Get the kid on the spectrum that's a gross caricature. Get the abusive Asian dad who kills his son, and then sprinkle in a little flamboyant gay stereotype. Because why not? This is the worst movie of 2021 by far. Like, Justice League is going to have to be really bad to overcome this. And that's going to have 4 hours. So, it's going to have 4 hours to be as awful as this was in 90 minutes. I think 100 minutes, whatever. On top of everything else, it would be one thing that this was just critically panned across the board. Everyone said, "What the hell is wrong with you," to Sia. But the Hollywood Foreign Language Press, or Foreign Press Association, whatever the term, the group behind the Golden Globes, saw that Sia made a musical, and it starred Kate Hudson, and said, "Put that as a nomination. Nominate this movie." Because apparently they didn't even bother watching it. They just said, Sia made a musical, we need another comedy or musical. You know, forget Birds of Prey, an actual comedy that's good. Forget Emma, an actual comedy that's good. Forget, all of that. No, we need to make sure to commemorate Sia's horrible, awful, autistic hate movie. It is genuinely... I haven't even scratched the surface of how awful the depiction of autism is. It's just genuinely reprehensible. And the fact that the people behind the Golden Globes said, this is okay, even if it doesn't win, it would be a miracle if either Hudson or this movie won. But the fact that they were even nominated shows how little respect the Golden Globes have for us. Like, award shows are always garbage. They're always, in-house back-patting and saying, good job, and it's all about networking and the people you know and who has the most influence. It's never a meritocracy. It's never truly about who was the best. It was always about who has the best connections. It's always been that. But just the fact, this puts them on Grammy levels for how despicable they are. Fuck you, Golden Globes. All things being said, I don't think I ever really do this. I'm somebody who is all for the ethical consumption of movies. I would much rather pay whatever the legal means for consuming a movie is, rather than stealing it, because I want that filmmaker to be, I want that filmmaker to be compensated. If we were stuck in this capitalistic society, I would much rather compensate somebody for their work than not. I don't want anybody behind this movie to be compensated. If you do want to suffer through this like I did, do not pay for it. Do not give them one red cent. I don't want this movie to fail financially as bad as it did critically. Like, we're talking worst of 2021, maybe worst of the century. I'd have to... this is a real contender for one of the worst movies ever made. And if you want to endure it and suffer through it, do not do it by giving them money. Do not compensate them for making you suffer.
All I want is for it to stand still. I didn't get in.
Well, it was just Valentine's Day, so I might as well review one romance movie. I did binge watch the original two To All the Boys movies during my 2020 recap because I watched the first one to lead into the second one, which came out last year, and both of them are fine. The initial premise of the first one is the most interesting thing about it, and I liked the secondary love interest in the second movie because the lead interest is just not interesting or good at all. I don't get it, but they're fine. They don't interest me, but as far as young adult romance goes, like, After and The Kissing Booth exist, so if somebody said they like To All the Boys, then I'm not gonna raise an eyebrow. It's not a big issue. It just is. As for this movie, it comes down to we're kind of reaching the end of the arc. I don't think there's going to be a fourth one after this. I think this is the end of the trilogy. We're dealing with the main character graduating from high school and moving on to college, and what that means for her relationship with this guy who I don't understand why she likes, and everything else that's going on around her surrounding that. And this is kind of my least favorite, just because this is the one that least hooked me in. Granted, these aren't for me at all, but the initial premise of the idea of she wrote these love letters and never sent them, and because she's a hopeless romantic who needs a boyfriend, her sister sent out those letters, and so she had to deal with the repercussions of that. And then the second movie had her, in a love triangle with a guy who was genuinely charming and sweet and cared about her, and the douchebag that she apparently just likes because for some reason I don't get this guy's. I don't get Peter's appeal. I don't. And then the final movie is about her graduating high school and the end of this whole arc and what happens next. And I think that's the least interesting. Like, the drama is what college will she go to and how that will affect her relationship with Peter. I don't care about either of those because whether you go to college and what college you go to doesn't matter. Like, that's the thing. I am over a decade past the point of this being relevant to me. But even at the time, like, where kids went to school, who cares? Whether they went to school, who cares? High school relationships, who cares? Like, are you happy? Did you stay together past high school? Fine. If not, fine. None of this is relevant to my interest. So I have to keep in mind that this isn't made for me. So I don't want to ding the movie for doing these things that don't matter to me, because what should matter is whether the movie is good. The movie's just all right though. Like, it's just okay. Like, Laura Jean is like an okay character. Like, she's a neurotic and a hopeless romantic, and I'm guessing that's who the series is aimed for. Young, hopeless romantic, girls who probably should go to therapy because of their neuroses. But overall, like, the filmmaking is fine. The acting is fine. It's passable. It's not awful. It's just fine. Like, everything about this is okay. So that's why I don't ding it the way I would. Like, I haven't even seen The Kissing Booth. I've just heard so many things about how awful it is, just in terms of like what exactly it's depicting as romantic. And yeah, the after I've definitely seen, and it is nowhere near that bad. So I will give the movie that. It is not 50 Shades for teenagers. Really, the best way to describe this movie is vanilla. Now, vanilla can come off as condescending, like it's vanilla, it's boring. But plenty of people like vanilla. Like, vanilla is a great base for a lot of stuff. Like, it's okay for things to be vanilla. Most media is vanilla. It's not amazingly great or terribly awful. It is in that spectrum of the middle. And it's okay to be that. It is okay to be kind of, just vanilla. Because some people are really into, some people are fine with that. And there's enough things here that even though it's pretty vanilla, it's fine. It's just, it doesn't hurt anybody. It doesn't, it's not going to rot your gut, or it's not, reprehensible or anything like that. It's just fine. So, like, if you do like this, good for you. Enjoy it. I don't really care one way or the other. I do want to say the one takeaway from this whole endeavor is that you can always do better than Peter. Seriously, I don't get the feel of this guy. He's like a cardboard cutout with less personality. Like, why this guy? Why? Because he's hot? Is that it? Because there's plenty of hot guys with personality. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying, like, vanilla. There was a guy in the second movie who was, why him?
It's birthday time.
I enjoy a man of few words.
Speaking of things with more flavor, y'all want to see some crazy shit? When the trailer for this dropped, I was hooked. I was definitely into this whole concept. A lot of people said, oh, it's Five Nights at Freddy's. It's like a Five Nights at Freddy's. In concept, that's it. It takes as much from Five Nights at Freddy's as it does from, like, that episode of The Simpsons where they go to Itchy and Scratchy Land and the animatronics go crazy and try to kill people. Like, yeah, I mean, this thing goes all the way back to, like, frickin' Westworld, the original one in the 70s. So, I mean, yeah, the concept is, like, very loosely Five Nights at Freddy's, because Five Nights at Freddy's is about survival. Willy's Wonderland is about Nicolas Cage kicking animatronic ass and leaving them nothing but cotton fluff and metal scraps. From the initial shot, this movie establishes itself as a grindhouse grade B movie. Like, right from the get-go, this movie knows it's just there to have fun. It is not here to be taken seriously. It is Nicolas Cage driving around in the muscle car, doesn't even have to say a word. Just drinking beer, just being this stoic badass and having to deal with this killer nonsense going on around him. Like, this movie recognizes it's not here to be quote-unquote good. It's here to have a good time. And when it's dealing with Nicolas Cage, it is a good time. It's just when it's not Nicolas Cage that it's not as good. See, surrounding Nicolas Cage having to spend the night cleaning up a, rundown showbiz pizza, for those who get that reference, it also has this the side plot of the actual town itself. And the actual town itself is not very, compelling. Like, yeah, there's the whole, it's kind of like I said, grade B horror schlock. Like, the kids that are there trying to stop, like, there's the lead kid who wants to destroy Willy's Wonderland and her kind of asshole friends that are just basically there to be cannon fodder. There's the corrupt officials in the town, the guy who owns the shop, the sheriff and all that, and how they're tied into all of it. And none of it's all that good. Like, really, any focus shifts away from Nicolas Cage, the movie begins to suffer for it, because if it wasn't for Nicolas Cage, this movie would not be as fun to watch. I will say that. Nicolas Cage makes this movie as fun as it is. And it really says something that Nicolas Cage doesn't say a word of dialogue in the movie, and yet he outshines every single actor here. Without saying a word, Nicolas Cage is the best actor in this whole movie. That's just how good he is. compared to everything else around him. And yeah, I mean, when it's him kicking animatronic ass and cleaning up this rundown showbiz pizza, it's fun. And I wish it was more of that, but they digress into then trying to like establish a backstory and give these other supporting characters, and they're not all that interesting or compelling, and I would much rather just watch it could be a one-man movie with Nicolas Cage having to clean up this rundown Chuck E. Cheese to shift up the reference, and him just dismantling every single animatronic by kicking their ass, and it would be a blast. But anytime it digresses from that, it becomes, a bit of a slog. And that's the thing too, is like the action is there are points where it does rely a bit too much on the shaky cam to make it seem that it's that whole Bourne Identity sort of like make it seem like you're in the middle of the fight instead of just taking a step back and letting the fight happen. I would much rather prefer that than trying to hide it all under like what's going on. It feels like you're hiding the fact that you don't really have a good fight choreography or anything like that. But that's just me. I will say, like, once again, once he goes around, starts dismantling all of these animatronics, it's just a blast. And it kind of sucks that the rest of the movie isn't as fun as that. I think that's the problem, is that the hook was Nicolas Cage, basically destroying Five Nights at Freddy's, and the problem is everything else around that isn't nearly as fun or good. Now, I would say, like, check it out, but I wouldn't pay full price to see it yet. It's like $20 to rent right now. I'd wait this is a perfect, like, drive-in movie theater midnight movie. Like, this is perfect for, like, a midnight trashy B-movie thing. I would not be surprised if, like, there's, if there was, like, if we still had people like Elvira or, people who do the midnight movies on late night TV, this would be perfect for them because it's a schlocky B-movie horror, and it's fun in that regard. But I kind of I think you should wait until it gets cheaper, because I don't think you want to spend $20 on this right out the bat, because it's fun, not full price fun, sadly. And once again, like the showbiz pizza that's run down, you don't want to pay to enter this. Yeah, it needed some cleaning up to do. And there's not enough Nicolas Cage to really clean it up like in the movie.
¿Quiénes son esta gente?
What's nice about services like Netflix and Amazon Prime now and Hulu is that we've added an extra outlet for foreign releases to get American distribution. It used to be so much harder to get any kind of foreign language releases to come stateside because of our own industry. But now that we have these extra services, they can bring in so many more of these things. So we've got things from India, Japan, Korea, China, and for this movie, Spain. The premise here follows a prison transfer that was scheduled to happen late at night during the winter. And then along the transfer, this mysterious figure shows up and just stops the convoy dead in its tracks because he's targeting some prisoner in the armored van. And he spends the night essentially torturing and trying to turn the prisoners against the guard, transporting them, and trying to get at this singular prisoner. And so everybody's turning against each other, and it then becomes a story of survival, because as the title suggests, it is, sub-zero temperatures outside, and so they'll have to deal with the elements outside as well as this guy trying to kill them. And it's a solid thriller. I really dug this. I watched the English dub because that was the default on Netflix, and I kind of wish they would just keep the original dub. Like, I started watching The Yin Yang Master, a Chinese epic on Netflix as well, and that defaults to the dub as well, and I'm like, I can just watch, why wouldn't I just watch the original? Like, if somebody wanted to watch the dub, let that be an option, but why is the dub the default? Why can't I have the original language as the default setting? It feels kind of like unfair to that original filmmaker that the version they made isn't the one that people are going to see by just clicking. And that's just me. That's just me, though. I will say the director here, I believe Luis Quies. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But this is his second feature film, and he is proving himself. I want to check out some of his other work, and I would not be surprised if somebody picked him up to make some work here stateside. He has a great eye for cinematography, and his shot setups are just excellent. And his storytelling is pretty solid too. Like, the movie deals with Spanish politics, the sort of seeing of prisoners as this lesser kind of leech on society, as well as how this guard is wanting to do the right thing, be a good person, uphold the law, be this, upstanding figure, only to realize just how corrupt and grimy and dingy and gray criminal justice is, and him having to, him being pushed to see how far he will go to be this morally upstanding guy. And so yeah, Quies is a good storyteller and a fantastic filmmaker. I would not be shocked if he gets picked up to make something over here, because he definitely has a good eye for it. I will say it gets, there's some good effects here. People catch on fire. There's a lot, stuff where things are underwater. So I mean, Quies does a lot of good effects work in terms of practical effects and staging to make these guys suffer. The characters, not the actors, hopefully. But the very end, right at the end of the climax, the way it goes gets super dark. And I did not see it coming, and I won't spoil it. I'll say watch it for yourself. But the big twist, the big reveal of what's been going on, who the figure is, and why he's doing what he's doing, and then the guard's decision at the end is something. And I definitely recommend you checking it out on Netflix. Either dub is fine. The English dub is okay. It's not terrible. But I think you should stick to the original language to see it in its original form, because I think that's kind of the honest way to do it. And with how much Netflix pumps out, I kind of hope this doesn't get buried. I think people should definitely check it out, especially if you're into a good thriller. Speaking of stuff Netflix picks up and pumps out, if you're an international viewer, you may be wondering why I'm covering this like it's a new release. Because, outside of the US, this isn't a new release. This actually came out a couple years ago. And we only got saddled with it this year. So, Charming. I could have sworn that Saberspark or Film Brain, somebody covered this movie already that I knew. And when I looked up for any kind of review by a channel that I subscribe to, I didn't see any. So I don't know what happened. Maybe I just dreamt it. I don't know. But Charming is the latest from Vanguard Animation, which is a Canadian-based animation studio best known for Disney's Valiant, something that Disney kind of brought them in to animate for and then distributed. That's the one about the pigeons in World War II. And they also did Happily Never After, though not the sequel, and both Space Chimps movies, for those who remember that. So Vanguard is not exactly, highly regarded in terms of animation studios. This isn't like a studio like Blue Sky, which kind of struggled a bit and then was slowly finding its form, and then Disney decided to shut them down because we can't have nice things. It's okay. You knew this was coming. You knew it was coming. You knew Disney was going to go Unichronic Arts on Blue Sky. Just breathe. Okay, then. I think the big thing is that these sorts of subversions on fairy tales, they're not all that new, so it's not like it's a big, it was like when Shrek did it, it was the big thing. I was like, holy crap, we can do this. Then Disney did it. Vanguard already did it with Happily Never After. So, I mean, this is kind of already trodden ground. But I will say the idea that Prince Charming is the one in needing to break the curse because his charming personality and his way of attracting everyone around him is the curse. That's an interesting idea. I just don't think it's all that well executed here. I think the big takeaway I got was that the humor just wasn't consistent. Like, the humor varies from sort of postmodern meta, jokes on fairy tale tropes, to random non sequiturs, to, in true post-Aladdin fashion, anachronistic references in lieu of jokes. So, I mean, the humor is all over the place, and not a lot of it hits. So, if you're came here for the humor, it's not here, bud. It's just kind of random and all over the place, and it's not consistent or very good. Not to mention the fact that the cast here is also kind of random. Like, a bunch of them are pop stars. We've got, 2021's worst movie of the year director Sia in a bit role, but the main princesses and the main love interest are played by other pop stars, Demi Lovato and Avril Lavigne and Ashley Tisdale and Gem, whoever that is. But we've got all of these pop stars with these roles, presumably so they can sing, and they each only get like one song. I think Demi Lovato gets like two. So why cast these pop stars if they're not gonna sing? Why, what's the point? You don't hire Pavarotti so he can dance. But yeah, then of course you round it out with Wilmer Valderrama, of all people, as the prince, Nia Vardalos out of nowhere as the villain, and then just professional voice actors, Tara Strong, Jim Cummings, Carlos Alazraqui. They're just, just random professional voice actors to round out the cast. And it's just all over the place, and they're all inconsistent in their deliveries. Like, the professional voice actors give their usual performance. They're not, amazing. That's just what you expect from these people. Meanwhile, Wilmer Valderrama is pretty generic. The pop stars are not very good. Even Demi Lovato, who is the best one of them, is just not very good. The best one in this whole movie is Nia Vardalos, because she sinks her teeth into being a hammy, campy villainess. And if anybody of them, besides the professionals, are going to do more voice acting work, Nia Vardalos is good. Like, Nia Vardalos actually does something in this movie. So I'd rather see more from her as a voice actress than any of these other people besides the professionals. Like, there's a bit where John Cleese plays Cinderella's godmother, and I couldn't tell you anything about his performance. Like, it doesn't, like, you'd think John Cleese plays the fairy godmother. You think, oh, that's great. That should be hilarious. But I couldn't tell you anything about his performance or what happened or the character. It happened. And then it just went away in my brain because that's how little it mattered. I will say the animation is a bit of an improvement from Happily Never After. I would put it on par with a bit of Valiant. I think Valiant is their best animated movie in terms of like actual animation quality. But yeah, this feels like a better detailed Happily Never After, but still on the same par in terms of like character animation and movement and whatnot. And it just feels like Vanguard hasn't improved all that much in the long run. It has been a few years since I watched Happily Never After, but I would sooner go back and check that one out than revisit this one. This, for a movie called Charming, it doesn't really have any charm. It's just kind of bleh. This is definitely one of the blander movies of the year. We'll end things off with another TV show because Corey over at Double Toasted covered it and I wanted to watch it too because he's Snoopy. And the thing about the Peanuts is if you watch them in chronological order, you begin to notice a shift in tone. The original specials are very family-oriented. There's jokes and humor for kids as well as their parents. And people of all ages can enjoy it. And as time goes on, that slowly shifts into being more of a kid's property, especially when it gets to the era of like the educational stuff. So you begin to really... That's why it kind of feels towards the latter half, like the late 70s throughout the 90s. It feels like those specials aren't as good as the older 60s and early 70s specials. It just feels like there's a weird shift where they go from being, just fun for everybody to being like, something to distract your kids. And I thought the Peanuts movie was a great return to form, and I was hopeful for more from Blue Sky before... Just breathe. Just breathe. You knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. Okay. And I decided to also check out that Snoopy in Space for Apple Plus. And that feels exactly what I was talking about. It feels like it's just for little kids to teach them things. So I was a bit concerned going into this, like, what exactly am I getting out of this? Is it the fun for everybody thing, or is it the, PBS kids, like little kids are going to enjoy this and nobody else? And I'm happy to say it's fun for everybody. It, like the title suggests, it's specifically about Snoopy and specifically about his overactive imagination. And it's a lot, and it plays into that the whole run. There's only 6 episodes, but every episode has 3 segments, and they each kind of deal with how Snoopy interacts with the kids in the neighborhood, and how his overactive imagination gets the better of him. You got things like the first segment, the first one we ever see, is Snoopy prints his autobiography, self-publishes it, gives it to all the kids, and Charlie Brown reads through it and then is like, I'm sorry, none of this actually happened. None of this has ever happened. None of this is true. Like, what's going on? Why is none of this... Snoopy tells all of these outlandish tales, and Charlie Brown has to come in like, no, I found him at a puppy farm. And none of this actually happened. And... And then the way it ends is just like pure Peanuts fashion, where it's just Snoopy just completely disregards Charlie Brown and calls him like the big-headed kid or something, dedicated to the big-headed kid or something like that. And the people behind this definitely got the tone for these characters down. I will say the animation is the cleanest the Peanuts has looked. Normally Peanuts looks a little more janky, that you can tell like the edges are a little more scratchy in that Schultz fashion. But here everything's super clean and smooth. It is the nicest the Peanuts have looked in a while. And it feels a bit weird considering I'm so used to the older style from Schultz. But you get used to the animation pretty easily because they start doing fun things with it, and really the main selling point of this series is the writing and the humor, and it really these are all original things. Like the last couple of Peanuts shows were all like adaptations of comic strip stories, and here it's all original stories featuring these characters, and the people behind this really nailed it. And I will say, it's the same I don't know how much of the crew is there, but the cast is a carryover from Snoopy in Space, and the kids all match their characters. The fact that they're able to do a lot more than just be like, here's this educational thing about NASA and space travel, teach the kids, educational. The fact that they're not limited to that, it makes this a whole lot more fun, and I'll probably just go back and watch this again. And I kind of hope we get more. There's only the 6 episodes right now, so hopefully Apple is commissioning more and doing more with this show, because the people behind this did a great job. And I definitely, if you have Apple, the only problem is that it's limited to Apple TV Plus, so you'd have to subscribe to them. Hopefully they release it in a way that other people can check it out. But yeah, this is fantastic, and I hope we get more of it. Next week, we got Flora and Ulysses to look forward to, which is the superpowered squirrel movie for Disney Plus, as well as the dark comedy I Care a Lot, starring Rosamund Pike. Those seem to be the major releases coming out. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that I've been missing that I'm trying to catch up on, so expect more of that next week too. Until then, I'm John Bailey, and remember, don't let your overactive imagination and the FBI keep you from ditching that loser Peter and kicking animatronic ass. Also, fuck Sia. See you later, folks. my producer just showed up. So don't mind my producer. She likes to sit in on my recordings.